Hi, and welcome to another Average Joe Hockey Report. In today's video, we talk about the North Division and how I'd say I've been quite disappointed in it. When the North Division was announced, hockey fans were excited because people said that every team had a chance except for Ottawa. Fans of Canadian teams thought that every game could go either way, but that's become less of the case, and and teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Winnipeg Jets, and the Edmonton Oilers are starting to pull away from every other team in the division. Even then, every team has either been a disappointment or have been cringy or are what they are expected to be with not too high of expectations. The division is exciting and has some close races, but for a lot of the wrong reasons. Let's go over every team and their flaws this season, starting with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They were in first place for a long time, but were at one point tied for first place, but are now back in first with their win and overtime loss over Edmonton on Saturday and Monday, but are now in dire straits, which doesn't surprise me. This is a team that was looking to address how to handle playoff situations with the risk of decreasing their performance in the regular season. Case in point with the additions of Joe Thornton, Wayne Simmons, and Zach Bogosian, who have been what I expected. The defense has also been what I expected. Now, while one of the reasons being is that Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren weren't deemed ready yet, the depth on defense, to no surprise, has been suspect, and I don't think is a defense that they can go far with. I feel like they always slightly improve their defense, especially with the signing of TJ Brody, but never improve significantly enough. And while it's been a part of the reason why Frederik Andersen has been lackluster this season, the fact that he's been lackluster for the past two seasons is a concern and may have the Leafs looking for a new goalie. Because let's face it, while Jack Campbell has been great this season, he's never been a starter, and, and 31 NHL games is the most he's ever played, and he's 29 years old. Also, not entirely sure if the Leafs currently have anyone else that could step in anytime soon. The reason why I bring up Campbell as 29 is because he's not necessarily exactly getting young and has never really played a more than 40 games, 50 games, or whatever. He's never played around that range. Anyways, now let's talk about the Winnipeg Jets. My main question coming into the season for the Winnipeg Jets is that will Connor Hellebuyck face less shots and have they made significant enough changes to the team? This question was obviously asked before the Jets traded for Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's been full of mixed reviews. The team is 1 point behind first place, and they have gotten rid of the bad habit of trailing and making late comebacks in the third period to win by taking the lead and not looking back. They've trailed at some points in their future games, but easily come back in maybe the second or whatever. They don't wait till the third to make the comeback. One thing that hasn't changed for the Jets is the amount of shots that Connor Hellebuyck has faced. Hellebuyck has once again faced more shots than any goalie in the NHL. The advanced stats don't look any better for the Jets. 40, their Corsi 4 and Fenwick 4 has been around 47%, and only 3 players have a 50% or higher Corsi and Fenwick 4. And one of those players is with that percentage is Logan Stanley, whom according to Daily Faceoff is on the third D pairing and isn't necessarily, I don't think, is known to be the best offensive player. A trade for Matthias Ekholm and a full-time Ville Heinola might be what the Jets badly need to turn all of that around in their future. Next is the Edmonton Oilers. After a slow start, they've really turned things around. The usual suspects which is McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent Hopkins, are doing their thing, and I'm not surprised at all that the addition of Tyson Barrie has worked out well. I've also liked the play of Darnell Nurse. Once again, though, the usual suspects on forward. After the usual suspects on forward, the forward depth seems a little bit thin, and it makes me cringe that the Oilers' turnaround season is in the form of 39-year-old goaltender Mike Smith. Smith is a goaltender with a history of being out of position and not in control of his game. He was horrible last season, and everyone was surprised that he was even brought back in by the organization. His stats are starting to trend the wrong way now, as he now has a save percentage of below .920. It's at .19, which is still good, but it used to be better. So time will tell if he goes back to earth or not. So while Edmonton does have promising prospects for their future in Kailer Yamamoto, Dylan Holloway, Evan Bouchard, and Philip Broberg, It's still at the moment being carried by the usual suspects. Doesn't necessarily have the greatest defensive depth, and the goaltending is not ideal. Next is the Vancouver Canucks. I knew the team was going to struggle as they try to figure out their goaltending situation, and it's no surprise that Thatcher Demko has taken the reins, as Braden Holtby has been what I thought he would be. Should be important to note that Demko is second in the NHL for most shots faced by a goaltender in the NHL, and his team boasts the 5th worst Corsi for percentage and the 6th worst Fenwick for percentage in the NHL, and that the defensive depth has been disappointing, which includes Nate Schmidt and Alex Edler looking like their production offensively will drop big time. Add in the injury to Elias Pettersson and players like Adam Gaudette, Jake Virtanen, and Travis Hamonic being a disappointment, and you see why Vancouver is where they are in the standings. Jacob Markstrom last season masked a lot of the Canucks' problems, and this season they are starting to show. Next is the Calgary Flames. Here I am thinking that they even had more depth overall than the Toronto Maple Leafs before the season started, especially when they added Jacob Markstrom. But I'd say that the team overall has been the biggest disappointment of the year. I honestly thought they had it all to represent Canada to bring back the Stanley Cup, but neither Markstrom nor David Rittich have given the team some good goaltending. The defensive depth is also not really pulling their weight, although ideally Rasmus Andersson and Juuso Valimaki need more time to develop on defense. But I feel that the offensive production as well is lacking, as they are 20th in the NHL in goals for. The team was reeking of inconsistency, but they seem to be consistently losing. And I was skeptical of the Daryl Sutter hiring, and sure enough, it hasn't led to any changes. At least Johnny Gaudreau and Elias Lindholm hasn't looked bad at all this season. All this doesn't matter, as the Flames just don't have what it takes this season despite all the moves they made. We're going to do next team, we're going to do a short video on the Ottawa Senators. There's really no expectations from them. Matt Murray has been what I thought he has been, and the team is still looking for and the team probably wants to see who's the next up-and-coming goaltender between Philip Gustafsson, Joey Daccord, and Marcus Hogberg. Basically, if you're a Sens fan, you have to be happy with the play of Drake Batherson, Tim Stützle, and Josh Norris when it comes to their young stars. And of course, Brady Tkachuk's been good, and Thomas Chabot's been good. There's not really much expectations there, though. This team is still rebuilding after all, so it's not like the Sens had anything to lose anyways, so the Sens are definitely better than they were last season. I must say that. I'll see if I could try to squeeze in the Montreal Canadiens, but it's a pretty long one, though. While I have them as a sleeper, and they have been what everyone thought they would be, which is in the middle of the pack. They started off strong, but went back to earth and cooled off. While the coaching change, I've seen some improvement in the special teams, but the lack of depth on defense and the player deployment in overtime has been a major issue. As it is, Ben Chiarot should not be on a number 1 D pairing on any team ideally, and wasn't necessarily playing the greatest, and has taken a lot of unnecessary penalties before his injury. But now that he's been injured, the Habs don't really have anybody that's been a major upgrade to take his spot. We've seen Victor Mete and Xavier Ouellet in and out of the lineup, and these two look like short-term players who don't really have a future with the team. Joel Edmondson has been currently placed with Shea Weber with the injury with Chiarot. And while Brett Kulak is back with Jeff Petrie and usually boasts a good puck possession stats, especially with Petrie, he isn't ideally a top 4 defenseman and can be very frustrating with the puck at times. Really, only Petrie and rookie Alexander Romanov, whom the team feels would rather not have him take on too much in his rookie season, are the only 2 ideal modern-day defensemen. This to me is more of a concern than the overall play of Carey Price, which has been slightly better lately. What also concerns me is the player deployment in overtime, which is why they only have 1 win outside of regulation. The strategy of starting defensive players who are good at winning faceoffs just to get the puck back to Petrie for the line to change needs to go away. like they they put on like the defensive players first, but then once they get the puck back, they Deno and Byron go off, and then the offensive players go on. The ideology of throwing Paul Byron out in overtime because he's fast is ridiculous considering he doesn't provide any offense and was even robbed by Connor Hellebuyck in one of the overtime losses this season for the Habs. They should ideally play their scorers in overtime in the overtime situations. But it's been those two main issues that have them where they are in the standings at the moment. Well, folks, there you have it. We went over how every team looks suspect and how the division times looks like hockey's version of the NFL's NFC East, with me not really having any faith in either Canadian teams playing for a chance to win the cup. This video may have no implications on how any of the teams go, and at times is based on opinion. So if I'm wrong, don't belittle me, educate me. Take care, everyone, and follow my Instagram page, Average Joe Hockey Report, my YouTube channel, Marty Tommy.